Today I'm going to tell you the story of a Civil War confession that remained hidden behind a church cross for nearly 150 years. Dave Morales was just doing routine restoration work at St. Matthew's Church when he removed an ancient wooden cross and discovered a blood-stained letter containing a decorated Confederate soldier's darkest sin, a war crime that would shatter an entire town's history. But the truth was more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're listening from. Sins of the Fathers. The ancient wooden cross had hung above the altar of St. Matthew's Church since 1865. Dave Morales carefully worked the rusted mounting brackets loose, feeling strangely uneasy as the heavy oak cross resisted his efforts. "Need any help up there?" Pastor William Griffin called from below. "Almost got it," Dave replied, adjusting his position on the scaffold. "Just one more bracket and—" With a sudden crack, the final mounting gave way. Dave steadied himself as the cross came free, revealing a small recess in the stone wall behind it. "Pastor," Dave called down, "there's something here." Griffin climbed up with surprising agility. "What did you find?" Dave pointed his flashlight into the hollow space. Inside was a yellowed envelope, its edges stained with what appeared to be dried blood. The words, "Forgive me, Father," were written across the front in faded ink. "My God!" Pastor Griffin whispered, his face paling as Dave handed him the envelope. "After all these years—" "You know what this is?" Dave asked, surprised. Griffin hesitated. "There's always been rumors about Lieutenant James Blackwood and what happened at Willow Creek during the war." He held the envelope carefully. "I never believed them." "Should we open it?" Dave asked. "This should probably go to the Historical Society, or maybe the Blackwood family should be notified first." The Blackwoods?" Dave raised an eyebrow. "You mean like Mayor Robert Blackwood?" "His great-great-grandfather was Lieutenant James Blackwood," Griffin confirmed, "one of the town's founding fathers after the war. His statue stands in the square." "All the more reason to see what's inside," Dave suggested. In the pastor's office, Griffin carefully opened the brittle envelope and began reading aloud. "To whoever finds this confession, I write these words on the eve of what may be my final battle, compelled by conscience to unburden my soul of a sin I can no longer bear alone." Dave leaned forward, captivated. "I, Lieutenant James Aldridge Blackwood, of the Confederate States Army, 14th Tennessee Infantry, do hereby confess to the unlawful execution of 7 Union soldiers on the morning of March 12, 1863, at Willow Creek." Griffin paused, his face ashen. "Dear Lord, these men had surrendered their weapons and were under my protection as prisoners of war," the pastor continued. "But upon discovering they had knowledge of our weakened defenses at Millfield, I made the decision, against direct orders, to silence them permanently. I told my men they were being transferred. I led them to Willow Creek, where 4 of my most trusted soldiers, Sergeant Thomas Garrett, Corporal William Hayes, Private Samuel Wilson, and Private Edward Collins, helped me carry out the executions. We buried the bodies in the abandoned well behind the Willow Creek meeting house and swore a blood oath never to speak of what we had done." Griffin stopped reading abruptly, his hands shaking. "What is it?" Dave asked. "The names of the executed soldiers," Griffin whispered. "One of them was Abraham Griffin, my great-grandfather's brother." Dave stared in shock. "Your relative was one of the Union soldiers?" Griffin nodded. "My family came from the North originally. Great-grandfather settled here after the war, never knowing what happened to his brother who disappeared during a reconnaissance mission." "And the men who helped Blackwood, Garrett, Hayes, Wilson, and Collins, those are all founding families of Millfield, too?" "Yes," Griffin confirmed grimly. "The 5 families that rebuilt Millfield after the war, their descendants still run this town." Griffin continued reading. "I leave this confession in God's house, the only place where truth must prevail. There is more to tell. a greater sin that weighs even heavier on my conscience, but courage fails me now. Let it suffice to say that what lies beneath the waters of Willow Creek might explain why we have been cursed with defeat. May God have mercy on my soul. Lieutenant James Aldridge Blackwood, CSA. A heavy silence fell over the small office. "This changes everything," Dave finally said. "The town's entire history is built on a lie." "Not just a lie," Griffin corrected. "A war crime. And possibly something worse." Before they could discuss further, the church door opened, and Mayor Robert Blackwood's voice echoed through the sanctuary. "Pastor Griffin, I wanted to check on how the restoration's coming along." Griffin hastily handed the envelope to Dave. "Hide this. We need time to decide what to do." Dave slipped the confession into his tool belt just as the mayor appeared in the doorway. Tall and distinguished with silver temples, he looked remarkably like the statue of his ancestor in the town square. "Mrs. Collins at the Historical Society mentioned you found something interesting during the renovation, something behind the altar cross." "Just some old construction materials," the pastor replied smoothly. "Nothing of historical significance." Mayor Blackwood's gaze shifted to Dave, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Is that right, Mr. Morales? Nothing significant?" Dave forced a casual shrug. "Just debris from an old repair job." The mayor studied them both, his politician's smile never wavering. "By the way, Dave, I heard your daughter got accepted to Vanderbilt. The town scholarship committee meets next week. I'm sure she's a strong candidate for our Founding Families Fund." The implied message was clear. Cooperation had its rewards. After the mayor left, Dave and Griffin sat in tense silence. "He knows something," Dave whispered. Griffin nodded grimly. "The 5 families have protected this secret for generations." "What about Willow Creek?" "The letter mentioned something hidden there." "Willow Creek dried up decades ago," Griffin replied. "It's just an overgrown ravine now, out past the old county line." Dave made a decision. "I need to see it. If there's evidence that could corroborate this confession." "That's dangerous, Dave. If the mayor already suspects something, then we need proof before we come forward." Dave insisted. "I'll make copies of this tonight. Tomorrow I'll check out Willow Creek." "Not alone," Griffin said firmly. "I'm coming with you. Abraham was my blood after all." As they left the church, Dave couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Near the town square, the bronze statue of Lieutenant Blackwood seemed to follow them with its empty eyes, guardian of a secret that had remained buried for nearly 150 years. Buried secrets. Dawn had barely broken when Dave pulled up in front of Pastor Griffin's modest home the next morning. His pickup truck was loaded with basic excavation tools, shovels, picks, and a metal detector borrowed from his brother-in-law. The photocopies of Blackwood's confession were hidden in his glove compartment, with the original safely locked in his home safe. Griffin emerged from his house carrying a leather satchel and a worn map. "County survey from 1850, he explained, spreading the yellow document across the hood of the truck. "Willow Creek is about 5 miles outside town, near the old county border." Dave studied the map. "That's all private property now. The Henderson farm, I think. Abandoned for years," Griffin replied. "Nobody's been out there since Old Man Henderson died in '98. The drive took them through Millfield's historic district, past the imposing homes of the town's elite families. Dave couldn't help noticing the names on the mailboxes: Blackwood, Garrett, Wilson, Collins, Hayes, the descendants of men who had committed murder and concealed it for generations. "You know, I've lived here my whole life," Dave said as they left the town limits. "Never once questioned the story of our heroic founders." Griffin nodded grimly. "That's how history works. The victors, or in this case the survivors, write the narrative." The road deteriorated as they traveled farther from town, eventually becoming little more than a dirt track through dense woods. According to the map, they were close to where Willow Creek had once flowed. "This should be it," Griffin said, as Dave parked beside an overgrown path. The meeting house would have been up ahead, with the well behind it. They gathered their equipment and began hiking through the underbrush. Spring foliage made progress difficult, but after 20 minutes, they reached a small clearing. The foundation stones of a long-gone structure were barely visible among the weeds. "The Willow Creek Meeting House," Griffin confirmed, consulting the map, "which means the well should be." He pointed toward a cluster of trees at the clearing's edge. Dave approached cautiously, using his shovel to clear away decades of fallen leaves and undergrowth. Beneath the debris, they uncovered a circular stone structure about 4 feet across, the top of an old well, its opening sealed with a crude concrete cap. "This has to be it," Dave said, examining the weathered stones. "Looks like someone poured this concrete cap much later. It's not 19th century work." Griffin knelt beside the well. "If Blackwood's confession is true, there are 7 bodies down there. 7 young men who never got a proper burial or recognition." Dave tested the concrete cap with his shovel. "This isn't going to be easy to break through, and even if we do—" "We need to," Griffin said firmly, "for Abraham and the others." Dave nodded and began chipping at the concrete with a pickaxe. It was slow, exhausting work in the morning heat. After nearly an hour, they had barely made a dent in the thick cap. "Hold up!" Dave panted, wiping sweat from his brow. "I think I hear something." They both froze, listening. The distant sound of an engine reached them through the trees. Someone was coming down the old dirt road. "Could be hunters," Griffin suggested, though his expression was worried. "Let's not take chances," Dave replied, gathering their tools. "We can hide in the trees until we see who it is." They retreated to the edge of the clearing, just as a police cruiser emerged from the woods. Chief Thomas Garrett, a direct descendant of one of the men named in Blackwood's confession, stepped out, followed by 2 deputies. "They're searching for something," Griffin whispered as they watched the officers scan the clearing. Dave nodded. "Us. The mayor must have suspected we'd come here." "That concrete cap," Griffin murmured. "Someone in the 5 families must have sealed the well properly at some point, making sure the evidence stayed buried." The police began methodically searching the area, moving in a pattern that would eventually bring them to the well, and to Dave and Griffin's hiding place. "We need to move," Dave whispered. "Circle back to the truck." They crept through the underbrush, careful to stay low and quiet. They had almost reached the path back to their vehicle when a twig snapped beneath Griffin's foot. "Over there!" one of the deputies shouted, pointing in their direction. "Run!" Dave urged, and they broke into a sprint through the woods. Behind them, Chief Garrett's voice boomed. "This is private property. Stop where you are." They reached the truck just as the deputies emerged from the woods. Dave fumbled with his keys, finally starting the engine as the officers closed in. "Stop or I'll shoot!" one deputy yelled, drawing his weapon. Dave threw the truck into reverse, spraying dirt as they backed away. A shot cracked through the air, shattering the passenger window. Griffin ducked as glass showered over him. "They're actually shooting at us!" he exclaimed in disbelief. Dave spun the wheel, turning the truck around, and floored the accelerator. They bounced violently down the dirt track, the police cruiser soon visible in the rearview mirror. "They're willing to kill to keep this secret," Griffin said, pressing a handkerchief to a cut on his cheek from the flying glass, "just like their ancestors did." "We need to get to the state police," Dave replied, fighting to keep the truck on the rough road. "This goes beyond Millfield now." The cruiser gained on them as they approached the main road. Dave pushed the old pickup to its limits, but it was no match for the police vehicle's powerful engine. "I know a shortcut," Griffin suddenly said. "Turn left at the fork up ahead. It leads through the old quarry. The cruiser won't be able to follow through those narrow paths." Dave made the turn, leaving the dirt road for an even rougher track that wound through an abandoned limestone quarry. The truck bounced and rattled over the uneven terrain, but the gamble paid off. The police cruiser attempted to follow, but quickly became stuck between two rock formations. "That bought us some time," Dave said, checking the rearview mirror as they emerged on the far side of the quarry. "But they'll call for backup. We can't go back to Millfield." "My sister lives in Nashville," Griffin suggested. "We can head there and contact the state authorities." Dave nodded and turned toward the interstate. "What about the copies of the confession? I left one at home in my safe." Griffin's expression darkened. "If they're willing to shoot at us, they won't hesitate to search your house. We need to assume the only evidence we have is what's in your glove compartment now." "And whatever's at the bottom of that well," Dave added grimly. They drove in tense silence for several miles before Griffin spoke again. "There's something I don't understand. Blackwood mentioned a greater sin in his confession, something worse than executing prisoners. What could be worse than that?" Dave shook his head. "I don't know. But it must be significant if the 5 families are still covering it up after all these years." "He said it was beneath the waters of Willow Creek," Griffin mused. "Not necessarily in the well itself." "The creek dried up decades ago," Dave replied. "Whatever was there would be buried in the old creek bed now." Griffin's eyes widened suddenly. "Unless... Dave, do you know why Willow Creek dried up?" "Natural causes, I assumed. Drought, changing water tables." "No," Griffin said slowly. "In the 1950s, Mayor Harold Blackwood, Robert's grandfather, pushed through a project to divert the water for the town's new reservoir. The creek bed was deliberately drained." Dave glanced at Griffin. "You think they did that to bury something else? Something in the creek itself?" "It would explain why the 5 families have maintained their control over the town for generations. They're protecting something valuable." "Or dangerous," Dave suggested. As they approached the interstate on-ramp, a roadblock came into view. 3 police cruisers blocking the entrance, officers with weapons drawn. "They've cut us off," Dave said, slowing the truck. "We'll have to find another route." "There!" Griffin pointed to a service road that ran parallel to the highway. "That might connect to the next on-ramp." Dave turned sharply, avoiding the roadblock. In the distance, sirens wailed as more police vehicles joined the pursuit. "We need to ditch the truck," Dave decided. "They'll be looking for it." "The old train station," Griffin suggested. "It's just ahead. We can leave the truck and catch the 10:15 to Nashville." The abandoned passenger platform appeared around the next bend. Dave pulled behind the dilapidated station building, out of sight from the road. "Grab the confession and anything else important," he instructed Griffin. "The train should be here in about 10 minutes if it's on schedule." As they gathered their belongings, a voice called from nearby. "Mr. Morales, Pastor Griffin, I know you're there." They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. The voice wasn't threatening. In fact, it sounded frightened. "Please," it continued, "I want to help." Dave peered cautiously around the corner of the building. Standing on the platform was Elena Garrett, the police chief's 19-year-old daughter and one of Griffin's parishioners, unexpected allies. "Elena?" Pastor Griffin stepped into view, bewildered. "What are you doing here?" The young woman glanced nervously over her shoulder. "My father's got the whole department looking for you. They're saying you vandalized a historical site and stole church property." Her hands trembled slightly. "But that's not true, is it?" Dave remained cautious. "How did you find us?" "I overheard my dad on the phone with Mayor Blackwood. They mentioned the old train station as a place to check." She took a deep breath. "And I've been following the restoration project for my history thesis. I know you found something behind that cross." Griffin and Dave exchanged uncertain glances. "You can trust me," Elena insisted. "I've suspected something was wrong with our town's history for years. The founding families have too many secrets, too many locked rooms and hidden documents." The distant wail of sirens made the decision for them. "The 10:15 train will be here in 3 minutes," Elena said urgently. "If you're going to leave, it needs to be now." "Why would you help us?" Dave asked. Elena's expression hardened. "Because 2 nights ago, I overheard my father and Uncle Robert, the mayor, talking about protecting the legacy at all costs. They mentioned Willow Creek and something called the Bounty. The sound of approaching vehicles spurred them into action. "Come with us," Griffin urged Elena. "If they suspect you helped us." She nodded quickly. "I brought cash and left my phone at home so they can't track me." The 3 of them moved to the platform just as the train approached. They boarded quickly, finding seats in the nearly empty car as the train pulled away. Through the window, Dave saw police cruisers arriving at the station, too late to stop their departure. "They'll alert authorities in Nashville," Elena warned. "We can't go to the station there." "We'll get off at the Harpeth River stop," Griffin decided. "It's before Nashville. My sister can pick us up there." Once they were safely underway, Dave retrieved the confession from his pocket and handed it to Elena. "This is what we found." She read it silently, her face growing pale. "My ancestor helped murder prisoners of war," she whispered finally, "and my father is still covering it up." "There's more to it," Griffin said. "Blackwood mentioned a greater sin, something hidden in Willow Creek itself." Elena nodded slowly. "That makes sense. There's a family trust, the Five Families Foundation. It funds scholarships, the Historical Society, even my father's election campaigns. No one outside the Five Families knows where the money comes from. Old money from after the war," Dave suggested. "Too much for that," Elena replied. "The foundation gives away hundreds of thousands every year and never seems to run low." The train slowed as it approached a small station. Through the windows, they could see 2 police cruisers waiting on the platform. "They've alerted stations along the line," Dave realized. "We need to get off before the next stop." Griffin pointed to the emergency exit. "Between stations, when the train slows on the curve ahead." 5 minutes later, they jumped from the slowly moving train onto a grassy embankment. They rolled down the slope and quickly took cover in nearby woods as the train continued on its way. "My sister's place is about 3 miles from here," Griffin said, orienting himself. "We can cut through these woods." As they hiked, Elena explained more. "The Five Families meet every year on March 12th, the anniversary of the executions. They call it the Founders' Covenant. Only direct descendants are allowed to attend." "Have you ever been?" Dave asked. She shook her head. "I'm not considered a direct descendant. My grandmother married into the Garrett family, but my father attends every year. He always returns. Different, more determined, more focused on preserving our heritage." "March 12th is tomorrow," Griffin noted grimly. "Perhaps that's why they're so desperate to silence us now." They reached a small suburban home by mid-afternoon. Griffin's sister, Martha, was shocked by their appearance but quickly ushered them inside. "William, what happened to you?" she demanded, noting the cut on his cheek from the shattered window. Briefly, they explained the situation, showing her the confession. "You need to take this to the FBI," Martha said firmly. "This goes beyond local corruption. First, we need to figure out what's in Willow Creek," Dave insisted. "The greater sin Blackwood mentioned, that's the key to everything." Elena had been quiet, studying the confession more carefully. "There's something here," she said suddenly. "Look at how Lieutenant Blackwood formed his letters. Some are darker, pressed harder into the paper." Griffin examined the document. "You're right. Certain letters are emphasized." Elena grabbed a notepad and began copying the emphasized letters in sequence. When finished, she stared at the result in shock. "It's a code," she whispered. "It says, 'Gold shipment beneath Ford.'" Union gold, Dave realized. That would explain everything. Why they killed the prisoners, why the Five Families have been so prosperous. And why they diverted the creek in the 1950s, Griffin added, to access whatever was hidden there. We need to get back to Willow Creek, Dave said. Martha shook her head adamantly. That's exactly what they'd expect. The entire county is probably looking for you by now. There's another way, Elena suggested. The annual Founders Covenant meeting tomorrow. It's always held at the Blackwood estate. If the gold is what they're protecting, there might be records there. Breaking into the mayor's house? Dave looked skeptical. That's just asking to get caught. Not breaking in, Elena corrected. I can get us in. The Founders' Day celebration is tomorrow evening at the Blackwood estate, a public event before the private covenant meeting. Everyone in town attends. I would be walking into the lion's den, Griffin warned. Elena's expression was determined. Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight. The next morning, Martha's phone rang. She answered cautiously, then her expression changed to alarm. It's for you, she told Dave, hand over the receiver. It's your daughter. Dave took the phone. Katie, are you okay? His daughter's voice was tight with fear. Dad, there are police officers here. They say they need to talk to you about some stolen property. Chief Garrett is here too. In the background, Dave could hear a man's voice. Tell him we just want to clear this misunderstanding up. Don't worry, Dave said carefully. Everything's fine. Is your mother there? No, she's at work. Dad, they're saying if you don't come home, they'll need to take me to the station to answer questions. Dave's knuckles whitened around the phone. Put Chief Garrett on. After a moment, the police chief's smooth voice came through. Dave, this has gone far enough. Just bring back what you took from the church, and we can forget this unfortunate incident. My daughter has nothing to do with this, Garrett. Of course not, the chief replied calmly, but we have a responsibility to investigate thoroughly. It would be much simpler if you just came home. The threat was clear. I'll be there, Dave said tightly. Just leave my family out of this. After hanging up, he turned to the others. They're using my daughter to get to me. It's a trap, Griffin warned. I know, Dave agreed grimly, but I can't leave Katie with them. Elena stepped forward. You can't go alone, but we can't all go either. She thought for a moment. The Founders' Day celebration starts at 5. Most of the police force will be providing security there. If you create a distraction by turning yourself in, Pastor Griffin and I can get into the Blackwood estate and search for evidence. Dave looked at her skeptically. And how exactly would that help my daughter or any of us? Because, Elena said firmly, if we find proof of what the 5 families have been hiding, we have leverage, insurance. Griffin nodded slowly. She's right. Dave, you stall them. Keep them focused on the confession, not on what might be hidden at Willow Creek. We'll find what we need at the Blackwood estate. And if you don't, Dave asked quietly. Elena met his gaze steadily. Then at least your daughter will be safe. And tomorrow, I'll go to the state police myself. Confession or no confession. Dave considered their limited options. All right, he finally agreed, but I'm keeping one copy of the confession with me. If anything happens, it won't, Griffin assured him, though none of them fully believed it. As they finalized their plan, Martha turned on the local news. A reporter stood outside St. Matthew's Church, where yellow police tape cordoned off the entrance. Millfield authorities continue to search for 2 men who allegedly vandalized the historic St. Matthew's Church and stole artifacts of historical significance, the reporter was saying. Police Chief Thomas Garrett has issued a statement asking for public assistance in locating David Morales and Pastor William Griffin, who may be armed and dangerous. The camera cut to Mayor Blackwood standing solemnly before the church. It saddens me deeply that individuals would desecrate our town's sacred historical landmarks. Rest assured, they will be brought to justice. Dave turned off the television in disgust. They've already tried the case in public. All the more reason to find concrete evidence, Elena said firmly. We need something they can't spin or deny. As dusk approached, they prepared to separate, Dave to return to Millfield and face whatever awaited him there. Griffin and Elena to infiltrate the Founders' Day celebration and search for the truth behind the 5 families' dark covenant, the final revelation. Founders' Day brought Millfield's town square to life with decorations and festivities. Dave Morales watched from a distance as families gathered around the statue of Lieutenant Blackwood, blissfully unaware of the truth behind their town's history. With a deep breath, he walked toward the police station across the square. Chief Garrett was waiting on the steps, a triumphant smile on his face. "Dave," he called. "Glad you decided to be reasonable." "Where's my daughter?" Dave demanded. "Safe at home with your wife," Garrett replied. "We had a nice chat, that's all." Inside the station, Mayor Blackwood stood waiting. "The confession, Mr. Morales." Dave produced the photocopy. "This is what you're afraid of, isn't it? The truth about your ancestors." Blackwood examined the document, his expression unreadable. "A clever forgery, but a forgery nonetheless." "We both know it's authentic," Dave countered. 7 Union soldiers executed and buried at Willow Creek, and something else hidden there, something worth killing for. The mayor's eyes narrowed. "Where is Pastor Griffin?" "Safe," Dave replied, along with additional copies of the confession. Meanwhile, Elena and Griffin slipped into the crowded Blackwood estate. The historic mansion was open to the public for the celebration, though certain areas remained cordoned off. "The study will be locked," Elena whispered. "But there's a servant's passage my friend showed me once. The family archives must be inside." They navigated through the crowded halls, eventually reaching a quiet corridor. Elena located a small door partially hidden behind a tapestry. "This way." The narrow passage led them behind the walls of the mansion's main floor. Through small observation grills, they could see guests mingling in various rooms. "There," Griffin pointed ahead. "That must lead to the study." The hidden door opened into a book-lined room dominated by a massive oak desk. Eleanor moved quickly to a portrait of Lieutenant Blackwood, swinging it aside to reveal a wall safe. "Any idea about the combination?" Griffin asked. "March 12th, 1863, Eleanor suggested. "The date of the executions." The safe opened with a click. Inside were ledgers, documents, and a small wooden box. Griffin took the ledgers while Elena examined the box, which contained a brass key and a folded map. "Financial records," Griffin murmured, scanning the ledgers. "Dating back to 1863. Initial investment, Willow Creek recovery." Subsequent entries show regular disbursements to the 5 families. "This map shows Willow Creek," Elena said. "There's a marking at the ford crossing. And look, recent survey notes from the 1950s when they diverted the water." A noise from the corridor startled them. Voices approached. The private covenant meeting was about to begin. "The passage," Elena whispered urgently. They slipped back into the hidden corridor just as the study door opened. Through the observation grill, they watched 5 men enter, the current heads of the founding families. Mayor Blackwood placed a small golden object on the desk. "The covenant stands for another year," he announced. "As our ancestors swore in blood, so do we maintain our sacred trust." At the police station, Dave was growing impatient. "You've verified the confession. Now release me." "Not quite yet," Chief Garrett replied. "The mayor wants to speak with you first." Dave checked his watch. Griffin and Elena should be searching the Blackwood estate by now. "Tell me about Willow Creek," Dave said, drawing the chief's attention. "What did your ancestors really hide there?" Garrett's composure slipped momentarily. "You have no idea what you're meddling with, Morales. Some secrets are kept for the good of everyone." At the mansion, Mayor Blackwood addressed the assembled men. "Gentlemen, we have a situation. The confession has resurfaced." Murmurs of concern filled the room. Impossible, Judge Wilson objected. It was sealed in the church wall. Nevertheless, Blackwood continued, Morales and Pastor Griffin found it. Morales is in custody, but Griffin remains at large, possibly with another copy. What about the gold? Edward Collins asked anxiously. Secure, Blackwood assured him. The annual distribution will proceed as planned. Griffin and Elena exchanged glances. Their suspicions were confirmed. Union gold stolen during the war had funded the 5 families for generations. As the meeting continued, Elena accidentally shifted, causing a floorboard to creak. The men in the study fell silent. Someone's there, Hayes said sharply. They had no choice. Griffin grabbed the ledgers and map while Elena pocketed the brass key. They fled through the passage as the men began searching for the source of the noise. Back at the station, Dave heard commotion outside. Chief Garrett's radio crackled with urgent messages. Intruders at the Blackwood estate, a voice reported. Possibly Griffin and a woman. Garrett rushed out, leaving Dave with a deputy. Seizing the opportunity, Dave knocked over a chair and shouted, Fire! Everyone out! In the momentary confusion, he escaped through a rear exit. Griffin and Elena emerged from the mansion's servant entrance into the gardens, alarms blaring behind them. They ran toward the perimeter where festival crowds provided cover. We need to reach Willow Creek, Griffin panted. This key must open something there. They spotted Dave running across the town square toward them. This way, he called. Together they fled through back streets to where Martha waited in her car. As they drove toward Willow Creek, Elena studied the map. The ford crossing, she said. That's where the gold must be hidden. At Willow Creek they found the dried stream bed where the ford had once been. The brass key fit a rusted lock on what appeared to be a storm drain built into the bank. Inside was a narrow tunnel leading to a small chamber. Their flashlights revealed wooden crates stacked against the walls, each bearing the seal of the Union Army. Union payroll gold, Griffin whispered, meant for troops that never received it. Enough wealth to control a town for generations, Dave added. A voice spoke from the tunnel entrance, and to rebuild the South after the war. Mayor Blackwood stood there, flanked by the other family heads, all holding weapons. Our ancestors made a difficult choice, Blackwood continued. 7 lives against the future of the entire town. The gold rebuilt Millfield, funded schools, hospitals. Built on blood money, Griffin retorted. Perhaps, the mayor acknowledged, but the covenant has served this town well. And what now? Dave asked. More killings to protect your secret? Blackwood hesitated. Times have changed. Perhaps the covenant has outlived its purpose. Elena stepped forward. Then end it. Tell the truth. Honor those 7 soldiers properly. After a tense moment, Blackwood lowered his weapon. My great-great-grandfather wrote that confession, hoping for redemption. Perhaps it's time we honored that wish. 1 month later, a solemn ceremony took place at Willow Creek. The remains of 7 Union soldiers were properly interred in Millfield Cemetery with military honors. Descendants of the soldiers, including Pastor Griffin, stood alongside descendants of the 5 founding families. The gold was surrendered to federal authorities, though a portion was set aside as reparations for the soldiers' families and to establish a historical trust. The statue of Lieutenant Blackwood was removed from the town square, replaced by a memorial to the 7 soldiers. And in St. Matthew's Church, the restored cross was rehung, no longer concealing secrets, but serving as a reminder that even the darkest truths must eventually come to light.